You ever play Two Truths and a Lie? See if you can figure this one out. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I live in New Jersey, and I wear tzitzis. And it's a really deeply meaningful and spiritual experience. Which is the lie? You didn't really think I was from New Jersey, did you? I know what you're thinking. Really? Tzitzis? Sure, it's a Torah command, and we take that seriously, but a deeply meaningful practice? I don't object to wearing them, but it's not exactly the spiritual highlight of my day. But I think there is a deeper meaning to this mitzvah, and it's hiding in plain sight in the Torah verses that describe tzitzis. Here's what the Torah says. I'm in Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 15. They should make tzitzis for themselves on the corners of their clothes for all generations. You may have noticed that I didn't translate the word tzitzis. Usually, people translate it as ritual fringes. But is that what the word actually means? It seems to come from the word tzitz, which means, well, how about you guess? Is it A, string, B, knot, C, shawl, or D, seedling? The answer is D, seedling. Yup, seedling, as in little plant, a sprout. What in the world do our ritual fringes have to do with seedlings? I want you to hold on to that question. We're not going to answer it right away, but we will come back to it at the end. For now, let's keep reading in Numbers 15, because there's something else strange in the next verse about tzitzis. And you won't go after your heart and after your eyes that might lead you astray. Okay, that's what most English translations say. At least about the first part. You won't go after your heart and after your eyes. Except the Hebrew word is latur, and latur doesn't really mean to go. It means something much more specific. Latur means to spy. You know, like James Bond's. So the Torah doesn't want us to spy after our heart and eyes? What does that even mean? Why is the verse about tzitzis talking about spying? Latur is a really unusual word, and it might just be a clue that can point the way to some answers. Where have you come across the word latur before? If you're drawing a blank on that, consider this. When you think about the Torah and the word spying, what comes to mind? How about the story of the spies from Numbers chapters 13 and 14, the 12 men that Moshe sent to spy out the land? Some tend to refer to them as the Meraglim, but you may be surprised to learn that the book of Numbers actually uses the language of latur. Ha'anashim ha'hem ha'holchim latur et haaretz. The men who went to spy out the land. The word latur shows up not just once or twice, but like a dozen times in Numbers 13 and 14. Numbers 13 and 14. Do you remember where the verses about tzitzis are located? Numbers 15. Yeah, the very next chapter. The spies went to do this latur thing, to spy out the land, and God got really angry at them. And then right after that story, God says, hey, children of Israel, wear tzitzis. And that way, you won't latur anymore. It almost sounds like the law of tzitzis is somehow a response to the sin of the spies. Now, perhaps that strikes you as faintly ridiculous. And if latur was the only connection between the spies and tzitzis, then yeah, we could chalk it up to coincidence. But it's not the only connection. For example, listen to what the spies say in their report about the land. The people of the land are giants. We were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. Now, do you remember the eyes from tzitzis? You won't go after your heart and after your eyes. That might lead you astray. And it's not just eyes. We find heart in the spy story too. Listen to how the people reacted when they heard about the giants in the land. When our brothers said that the people of the land were bigger than us, they melted our hearts. Now, I'll admit, we don't yet understand how all of this stuff about grasshoppers and melted hearts fits together with tzitzis. But it's interesting that we've got spying, eyes, and now heart showing up in both places. And there's more. When God punishes the people for the sin of the spies, this is what God says. Your children shall be wanderers in the wilderness for 40 years. They will bear your strayings. Straying also came up in Tzitzis. You won't go after your heart and your eyes. That might lead you astray. It really does seem like there's a connection here. The Torah seems to be saying, if you want to understand what Tzitzis is all about, you have to understand what went wrong with the spies. So, what did go wrong with the spies? If I had $1 for every Dvar Torah I've heard about that. The spies doubted God's power. They spoke Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael. Well, I want to offer a slightly different explanation, but one that I think is convincingly rooted in Moses' own words. You weren't willing to go up to the land, Moses chided the people. You said, it's because God hates us that God brought us out of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us. The people said, what? God brought us out of Egypt because God hates us? That's what they think is happening? That is warped. But it's not even the only strange thing they say. After the comment about those people were giants and we were like grasshoppers, listen to their very next reaction. It would have been better if we died in Egypt, or even if we could just die right here in the wilderness. Why is God taking us into that land to get us all killed in a war? Come on, let's go back to Egypt. Reading this kind of makes me want to yell. How could anyone even think that? Go back to Egypt? That makes no sense. I mean, don't these people remember how God miraculously redeemed them from slavery, led them through the wilderness, and protected them? Well, apparently it was all just a big mousetrap. God is intentionally setting them up so they'll die in a war because God hates them and always has. So anything would be better than God's plan, even going back to Egypt. And now we're saying that maybe Tzitzit is some kind of response to this story? That doesn't seem to make sense. How are we supposed to learn about this mitzvah from people who were so confused that they couldn't even recognize God's kindness to them? What could be making the children of Israel look at the reality right in front of their faces and interpret it as God hating them? Well, let me ask you a question. Imagine that your friend is dating someone, and he does all the right things. He's emotionally available, he's super supportive, he professes his love to her all the time, but she just can't bring herself to believe that he's for real. And before you know it, she's pushing him away. What might be going through her mind? Well, maybe if someone has a hard time believing in themselves, if they don't see themselves as worthwhile, then they might also find it hard to believe that anyone else would value them. I think something similar could be going on with the children of Israel here. And I think that comment about grasshoppers could offer a clue. We were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. You would expect the text to say we were like grasshoppers in their eyes, but that's not what it says. It says we in our own eyes were like grasshoppers, and so others saw us that way too. Well, what does it mean that they saw themselves as grasshoppers? They saw themselves as these small, lowly things, hopping around in the dirt. It sounds like they had low self-esteem. And that feeling had disastrous consequences. To see it, you just have to follow their thought process. Listen to the very next thing they say. What is God trying to do? Kill us? Come on, let's go back to Egypt. If you see yourself as a grasshopper, maybe that's actually the logical conclusion. If God is sending us grasshoppers into battle against giants, God must be trying to kill us. God must hate us. Well, thanks but no thanks, God. We don't want your so-called promised lands. We don't want to die. We're not falling for that. We'd rather return to Egypt. Of course, we know that God wasn't trying to kill them. God was going to lead them to a miraculous victory against the giants. But they didn't see it that way. Because when you hate yourself, you can get to thinking that others hate you too. It's a new way to see the sin of the spies. That what started as low self-esteem led them to reject God. You might even say that they went after their heart and their eyes. and that led them to stray. What do I mean by that? Their eyes refers to how they saw themselves as small, lowly, and their hearts refers to how they felt about themselves. Their hearts melted. They succumbed to fear. Instead of drawing strength from God's promise, I will bring you into the land, they leaned into their sense of worthlessness and ended up pushing God away. And now, I think we're ready to come back to Tzitzit. The story of the spies ends in Numbers chapter 14. And in the very next chapter, God comes and says, put these things called tzitzis on your clothes. You'll see them, and you won't go after your heart and after your eyes, which might lead you to stray. Tzitzis, somehow, are supposed to be the antidote. They're meant to safeguard us from feelings of worthlessness that can lead us to stray from God. But how? How does wearing tzitzis protect us from self-loathing? If I think I'm pathetic, I just, put on this undergarment with strings hanging down and poof, suddenly I'm Mr. Confident? That doesn't make any sense. Well, if that's all your tzitzis are to you, an undergarment with strings hanging down, then yeah, your tzitzis won't do a thing for your self-esteem. But what if your tzitzis are more than that? All the way in the beginning of this video, we asked what the word tzitzis means. We said it's a sprout, a seedling, and we wondered what in the world that had to do with our ritual fringes. I want you to picture a seedling, a little green seedling that's just barely peeking out of the soil. What would that image symbolize? A seedling is puny. It's this teeny, lowly, earthly thing, but it can become a tree, a redwood. It can grow to reach the heavens. A seedling is potential. So God says, take that and attach it to your clothing. These little seedlings made out of fabric. You'll see them, and it'll be like God is whispering in your ear. You have the potential to reach the heavens. You just have to give yourself the space to grow. Now, you might be thinking, thanks for the explanation. It was very sweet. But it sort of sounds like tzitzis is for people with issues. Not for me. My self-esteem is A-okay. And if that's what you're thinking, I want to gently push back. Sure, we may not all be walking around thinking that God hates us. But in your heart of hearts, do you see yourself as a big person or a small person? Do you see yourself as someone who is holy, someone with an epic godly destiny? Or is it more comfortable to shrink back and say, if you're looking for a tzaddik, look elsewhere. I'm just a regular person. Well, God didn't make two kinds of people, big people and small people. God created us all as seedlings, small, but with infinite potential. When we don't see our potential and we settle for being less than we could be, there's a sense in which we're straying, a sense in which, by selling ourselves short, we're betraying God. Don't do that, Tzitzit urges us. You too can be a redwood. So the next time you're putting on tzitzis, try that on for size.
Thanks for watching. Meaningful Judaism is a project of Aleph Beta Labs, and we're supported by generous folks just like you. Make sure to subscribe and go to alephbeta.org to find out more.